Rear Admiral David Dixon Porter remembered when he reflected on the Civil War, he remembered that he only lamented two officers leaving the old Navy, as we will call it. And those two officers were John Mercer Brooke, who I've talked about before, great inventor of the Brooke gun, inventor of the CSS Virginia, but one of his partners in crime was Catesby Ap Roger Jones. And Jones was an ordnance expert. And so he will, of course, join the Confederate Navy. And of course, Jones is most famous for the battle between the CSS Virginia and the Monitor. However, his work for both the Union Navy and the Confederacy is tremendous because he was a great ordnance expert. And he came from one of the most illustrious families in Virginia, and of course, impacting the entire United States. His great grandfather was a hero of the French and Indian War. So that shows how far back this family goes. Tall, well-proportioned, and always immaculately dressed, Jones maintained a commanding presence despite walking with a slight limp that was caused during a leave that he was in Europe, where a Parisian riot took place right in front of where he was staying. And of course, he got shot in the hip. He had to delay his return to America in time to attend his father's funeral. I have to tell you, he was born at Fairfield Plantation in Frederick County. That was his grandmother's home. It's near Berryville. Frederick County now is Clark County. And so I'm not in charge of that, but sometimes it's hard to say where was he born. So anyway, Catesby Jones, his mother was Mary Ann Mason, who was a direct descendant of William Byrd II, Robert King Carter, and her first cousin was Robert Edward Lee. These folks are called FFVs, or First Families of Virginia, and are expected to do whatever duty to defend the nation that comes their way, but especially they wanted to defend the honor of Virginia. Well, I got to tell you, Catesby Jones' father is a very illustrious individual, and he is Roger Ap Catesby Jones. Now, I'm going to stop here. What is all this app going on, right? And everyone asked me that. A mobile phone, right? Well, no, they didn't have them then. Thank you very much. But it is a Welsh idiom for son of. So this person is Roger Ap Catesby Jones. His father was Catesby Jones of the Revolutionary War fame. His son, one of his sons, is going to be Catesby Ap Roger Jones. So you see how it works. Keep everybody somewhat confused. They didn't like to use, first, second, third, junior, and so forth. So anyway, this man joined the U.S. Marine Corps in 1809. He resigned his commission from the Marine Corps in 1812 when he joined the U.S. Artillery. And he's actually at the Battle of Queenstown Heights with Winfield Scott. He befriends Winfield Scott. He's also in the Niagara campaign with Winfield Scott. So Roger Ap Catesby Jones goes from a captain to a lieutenant colonel. And I have to tell you, he is selected to become the Adjutant General of the U.S. Army, and that's in 1825, excuse me. Now, I got to tell you, this is a lofty position. Eventually, he'll be breveted to Major General. There are very few breveted major generals, and he was breveted in 1848. He died in 1852 of, they don't say the causes. But Catesby Jones had an equally famous uncle, and his name is Commodore Thomas Ap Catesby Jones. Okay, we got that little progression going. And so Jones was a hero of the War of 1812, particularly the Battle of Lake Borgne. And during the look, he's using what are called Jeffersonian gunboats. See, Thomas Jefferson came up with the concept that, oh, we don't want to fight wars overseas, so we just want to defend, our coastline. And so we'll do it with these gunboats. These gunboats have one sail, oars, right? 24 oars. They're armed with a 24-pounder long cannon. It has also two 12-pounder, two per broadside, 12-pounder carronades and some swivel guns. So as you can see in this picture, those gunboats are not really up for attacking major ships, are they? But it is a terrible time for the United States, because in December of 1814, the British will, of course, using Pensacola as a base, they will be able to move against New Orleans. They'll try to do a pincer movement against New Orleans by going by way of Lake Borgne, which gives you access to Lake Pontchartrain, which is right behind what city? New Orleans. And the British, because of their superior force, were forcing their way behind New Orleans. And Thomas Ap Catesby Jones developed a tactic that drew the British ships into shallower water so that he could then work around them. It was a terrible defeat. All of his gunboats are going to be destroyed, but you know something? He gives time for General Andrew Jackson to, make a proper defense of New Orleans, limits the amount of British soldiers that can access New Orleans. So he is a bona fide hero. I got to tell you, now everyone thinks he's great. He gets even greater when he's commander of the Pacific Squadron, Commodore Thomas Ap Catesby Jones, during a threat that Mexico may go to war with the United States. He will occupy Monterey, California, which was then the capital of Alta California. While everyone in the United States said, yay, what a great guy. Of course, the government says, well, you're not supposed to do that, so desist. Well, so Thomas Jones does so. But I have to tell you, his leadership qualities, his brilliance is going to influence one person, and that is Catesby Ap Roger Jones. I know I had that. I'm sorry, I can't find my clicker. I didn't eat it, did I? I have so many pockets. I got it. Sorry. Well, this picture's a little ahead of the thing, but I want to tell you that Catesby Ap Roger Jones joins the Navy in June 1836. His first detail was the Macedonian, which was a frigate commanded by, guess whom? Captain Thomas Ap Catesby Jones. Okay, so He does well as a midshipman serving under his uncle. He then is named aide to Commodore George C. Reed on the Columbia. He will then attend what is known as the Philadelphia Naval School and became a passed midshipman in 1841. 1842, he's going to be assigned to the Department or Depot of Charts, serving under and learning under Matthew Fontaine Maury. So in 1843, Jones is going to be detached to the brig Perry, which leaves from Hampton Roads and goes to Hong Kong. When he's in Hong Kong, he then is transferred to the frigate Brandywine, and he circumnavigates the globe, coming back to Gosport Navy Yard. So everyone thinks he's pretty good. He gets promoted to master in 1848, and he's detailed as master of the USS Ohio, which was a ship of the line. And the Ohio is carrying Thomas Ap Catesby Jones, who's going to assume command of the Pacific Squadron at the very end of the Mexican War. The Ohio operates in basically Baja Peninsula. The big thing is, though, on board the Ohio, who goes on board the Ohio in 1848 there in Baja, California, is a guy known as John Lomer Worden. I want you to remember that because they'll meet again. The Mexican War is over, and he's going to be promoted lieutenant in May of 1849, just as the Americans abandoned Baja Peninsula. Now, in 1853, he's assigned to the U.S. Navy Ordnance Bureau at Washington Navy Yard. He works directly with John Dahlgren on various artillery experiments, because we had accepted a design for our naval guns created by Brigadier General Henry Puxet-Hans. He is a Frenchie. He develops the shell gun for naval use. However, those guns are flawed. Sometimes they burst. And so Dahlgren, with Catesby Jones as his assistant, will create the first really effective shell gun, the 9-inch Dahlgren shell gun. There's one right outside the theater that was used on the CSS Virginia, just to let you know. So you can come and see this type of gun. Now, he was once the 9-inch gun was perfected, it becomes the standardized broadside gun for the U.S. Navy. And so it's designed to go on the Merrimack class of frigates and the Hartford class of frigates. Okay, when you see paintings of the gun deck of the Hartford in action, like at Mobile Bay, that's a 9-inch Dahlgren they're serving. And as a result of that, they want to test how good these guns are in broadsides. So Jones is assigned as gunnery officer for the USS Merrimack in 1856. And he says that the Merrimack was not a good gun platform in essence. A vessel with such a great dead rise as the Merrimack's could not offer a heavy battery with substantial stability. In a heavy sea, it will be difficult to handle her battery. He later, of course, served on a couple of other ships that had those newly fitted 9-inch, and some had a 10-inch shell gun in pivot, like the Plymouth, sloop Plymouth, and the gunboat Pawnee. Oh my gosh. So when Virginia left the Union in, of course, April 17, 1861, immediately Jones joins the Virginia State Navy, is named a captain. He's sent down to Gosport Navy Yard to try to capture that yard. In fact, he and Thomas Kevel of the United Artillery, 41st Virginia, will actually capture Fort Norfolk. Some people have been to Fort Norfolk. Fort Norfolk is the best preserved War of 1812 fort in at least Virginia. And I have to say, it also had a huge magazine that had 300,000 pounds of gunpowder. And when the commander of the Gosport Navy Yard found out that, oh my gosh, Fort Norfolk right across the Elizabeth River from Gosport Navy Yard, oh my gosh, he then decides to burn the yard. Catesby Jones will then be assigned to what is known as Jamestown Island. And he will design all the forts on Jamestown Island, which you can go and see. One of the major forts, and the reason why he's a naval officer, he's a lieutenant in the Confederate Navy. They have too many naval officers for billets because they don't have a lot of ships. And as a result of that, many naval officers have said, well, you guys build coastal forts or riverine forts because you know how to handle the big guns. And so Jones is there at Jamestown Island. In fact, one of the forts he builds is right on top of the site of the 1607 fort. So one place to put a fort is always a good place to put a fort. That's what I learned from that. Now, he is very good friends with a man known as John Mercer Brooke. And, he writes Brooke that he considered the Merrimack the most important naval affair the country has to deal with, and consequently, I am deeply interested in her success and anxious that it may be completed with my support. Well, he's telling him, I want to be part of this project. And so Brooke is developing iron plate for the Virginia, and he will, in essence, go to Tredegar. They say, we can only roll 1-inch iron plate. Brooke says that's not enough. So they set up a test pattern on Jamestown Island, shield, 36-degree slope, with 3 layers of 1-inch iron plate, 320 some yards away. They'll set up a 8-inch Columbiad, firing solid shot. It breaks through the shield. The shield is shattered. So next they try this 2-inch layer plate, and which Brooke had asked Tredegar to create. And as a result of that, that stopped shot, but they weren't finished yet. They then did 3 layers of 1-inch railroad iron, T-rails, and that didn't work at all. So that's how the Virginia got its shield of 24 inches of white oak, yellow oak, or yellow pine, and white pine. So that's the backing of the CSS Virginia. So Jones is going to be assigned. Now, let me tell you, this project, they had lots of troubles because John Mercer Brooke hates the naval constructor, John Luke Porter. They disagree on everything. So Jones becomes executive officer of the Virginia to mitigate between the two. Porter didn't want a ram. They said, we're going to have a ram, so forth, and problems like that, which is another lecture, I think, if we really look at those arguments. However, Jones is executive officer, and Franklin Buchanan will be named the commander of the James River defenses with the Virginia as his flagship. This is a bad picture. And of course, this results in the great two-day battle of Hampton Roads. I will tell you that the first day, Jones will take over command of the ship in a dramatic fashion when Franklin Buchanan is on the hurricane deck of the Virginia shooting at Union soldiers on the shore. They shoot back, and of course, he's wounded grievously in the hip. And as he's taken back down into the ship, he calls for Catesby Jones. Plug that ship full of hot shot. Plug her full of hot shot until she glows. Then he yells at the crew, "Do not worry, Ben, I am not mortally injured. I will soon be back amongst you." Well, he has to recuperate for almost 6 months because of that injury, but that's another story. Buchanan's crazy. I kid you not. So the big thing is that Catesby Jones is commander of the Virginia. He anchors it at Sewell's Point after March 8th, the big success. Hampton Roads has an eerie glow about it. And I'm going to say that Jones inspects the vessel. He notes that the smokestack has enough holes in it for a flock of crows to fly through unimpeded. But when he looks, they have a small leak at the bow of the ship. But when he tries to look, this is at night, dark water, he thinks the ram is still there. And so that is but it's not. That's right. Well, I was going to get to that. Geez, heaven help me, you know. Okay, so keeping in line. So his job is to go right after, because some people think they saw the Monitor come in that night. However, in the morning, they'll go, and Jones wants to strike the Minnesota immediately as he's moving towards it. The bow 7-inch Brooke gun fires a shot through the rigging of the Minnesota, and then a shot into the side of the Minnesota, causing a fire. It looks like the Minnesota is toast. However, as we know, the Monitor is next to it. Actually, the Confederates see it. They go, "Oh my gosh, that must be a coal barge taking off stuff." But instead, it came towards the Virginia and opened fire. And Jones immediately says, "Look out for hot work." That is the Erickson Battery, as they called it at first, the Monitor. And he already knows all about the Monitor. He has a copy of the Scientific American magazine where it published the plans of the Monitor. So he understands that he has the wrong ammunition to fight it. In fact, he had made a fateful decision with John Mercer Brooke not to build armor-piercing shot known as Brooke bolts. Consequently, Jones, during the battle, tries to move against the Minnesota, but the Monitor's always getting in the way. I have to say that Jones would be walking down the gun deck telling men, "Keep away from the shield." Then he noticed one of his officers, John Randolph Eggleston, standing behind his gun, snapping his finger. Jones comes up and says, "What is the meaning of this, sir?" And the retort was, "I find I can do as much damage to that ship by snapping my fingers, then firing my guns, and powder is precious, sir." Jones says, "Okay." He comes up with a concept with John Mercer Brooke, with John Taylor Wood, and to actually try to board, you get this, board the Monitor. So the concept was, I'm going to get my pea coats and I'm going to stuff them down the smokestack and the blower and over the pilot house. And then I got chloroform and I'm going to throw it into the turret and we'll take her by boarding. Well, that doesn't happen. It's a little risky. It would have worked because Erickson thought the Monitor was so great that he said we don't need any small arms. So that means that had the Confederates gotten into the turret, they would have taken over the ship, and history would be a little different. But instead, Jones will try to ram the Monitor, hits it at a glance, and basically the Monitor will try to ram the Virginia. Of course, it gets hit. Worden's wounded. Monitor breaks off action. Jones then goes down the gun deck to talk to every one of his officers. The pilots say we can only get within a mile. And he said, what should we do? And they all agreed, we will go back to Gosport, fix up our ship, because the two muzzles are missing on their guns. Some of their plate have been cracked. They need a new smokestack. They need a new ram. So they go back, and the Battle of Hampton Roads is over. Jones is sometimes criticized for his actions. Many say that he should have been more aggressive, but if you really read the battle, which I've talked about tons of times, you'll realize Jones did exactly what he should have tried to do. He will stay executive officer of the Virginia, and then he will be, when Abraham Lincoln comes to Fort Monroe, he'll result in the destruction of, well, the capture of Norfolk and the destruction of the CSS Virginia off Craney Island. Now, the commander then of the Virginia, Josiah Tatnall, he's 67 years old. He says he doesn't feel very well that day. Of course, he just blew up his own ship. And so Jones takes the crew. As they're ready to leave, he lines them all up and says, any of you all who have family here who want to stay, go ahead and stay. No one will judge you. Everyone gave a great hurrah, and the Confederates did not use huzzah, otherwise I would have, but just to let you know, they march all the way to Suffolk, down Cedar Lane. Yeah, you know where that is. And they get on a train, go to Drewry's Bluff, and they will build a battery. One part of the battery is a casemate to stop the Monitor, the ironclad Galena, the ironclad Naugatuck, Port Royal, and to stop them from advancing. That's 8 miles away from Richmond. Jones is so exhausted. Now, because I got to tell you, when they blew up the Virginia, it was Jones that set the powder lines. It was Jones that made sure this ship is really going to sink. And so, you know, he's exhausted by all this. So it's said during the battle, you see, when you're fighting a coastal battle, or the ship will fire, then the ship takes 6 to 8 minutes to reload its guns. The Confederates then come out of their bomb proofs, and they'll fire and reload, then go back down to their bomb proofs when the Federals fire. Catesby Jones is so tired that he falls asleep at the entrance to the magazine. If I took you to Drewry's Bluff, I could take you to the very spot. Oh my gosh, that shows exhaustion and how long and slow this battle was. Well, they stopped the Federals from getting to Richmond, and as a result of that, Jones seeks another command. First, he's sent to the Charlotte Naval Station, where much of the material from Gosport will be sent before Gosport is burned by the Confederates. Then he's assigned commander of this gunboat, the Chattahoochee. Now, he's only briefly as commander, but the Confederate Army had blocked the river, so the Chattahoochee is supposed to be able to go and be a commerce raider, and guess what? She can't get out of the river, and so Jones is transferred to perhaps one of his most important duties during the war, and that is as commander of the Confederate States Naval Foundry, or it's also known as the Selma Gun Factory. The gun factory also had other ordnance duties. It is covered a 50-acre site. 10,000 men worked at it. Jones was in command of the gun factory itself, where he made Brooke guns. In fact, every Brooke gun at Mobile Bay, some of them at Savannah and elsewhere in the South, all came from Selma. These things are hard to build. It takes 7 to 8 weeks to build a Brooke gun, because you got to cast it, you got to drill it out, you got to cool it, you got to put the bands on it, cool it again, and then you have to rifle it. So this is a long process. Nevertheless, Jones is able to produce over 100 Brooke guns. Now just think of a 6.4-inch Brooke gun, 10,000 pounds, right? You can just figure out is a big gun. And but they were able to continue work until May 25th, or April 25th, when the Federals come and they destroy the factory. This is a side note. Auburn University is built on the site of this factory. Oh, I don't want to go there. So the war is over. What is Jones going to do? Well, the first thing he does is he gets married to Gertrude Tart in 25 April 1865. They have 6 children. Everything's happy. Now he engages in a business with Robert Minor and John Mercer Brooke, buying up used American weapons and selling them down to South American nations. Just remember, Peru hates Chile, Chile and Peru hates Bolivia. I could go on. And so there's a constant need. And many Confederate naval officers are going to be serving in these various navies. So, however, there are all sorts of other nations trying to sell weapons. Their company goes bankrupt, and so he moves back to Selma with his family to work as an engineer. Now, I have to tell you, on 19 June, one of his sons, Catesby Jones, 7.5 years old, will be next door at a neighbor's house, and he's kind of tussling with the neighbor, Harold, son, who's 10 years old. Tat is 7.5 years old. And as a result of that, they will get into a fight. He then slaps Harold's sister. Oh my gosh. Mrs. Jones's sister has to break up the fight, take him back home. Tart gets punished, and then the next day he takes over a bag of fruit and an apology, right? Groveling to, well, Mr. Harold comes to the door, and of course, his name was Gerald Alfonso Harold. He was a mercantile person in the town of Selma, very successful. So Jones will send the son over. There is Hart and Harold, instead of reading the note, he sends his son out to beat up the younger Jones. Well, Jones sees this. Remember, he walks with a limp. He uses his cane. He goes over next door, and he's kind of emphatic when he's talking to Harold, saying, this can't happen. And Harold says, did you come here for a fight? And Jones says, I would never fight a puppy like you. Oh my gosh, and he slams down his cane when he does that. Well, Harold has a pistol, and he shoots Jones through the lungs, and Jones dies the next day. Jones's legacy is tremendous. He is, of course, one of the leading ordnance experts in the Confederate Navy as well as the old United States Navy. He is a classic example of subtle yet strong leadership. I lead by example. I don't have to be a blustery old tar like Buchanan was. I have a job to do. You all have a job to do with me, and we shall achieve. Just what he does at the Selma Gun Factory is amazing, to bring those research. Perfect place to put one, because Alabama has coal, iron deposits. So as a result of that, this Jones takes advantage of it all and produces those Brooke guns, which you can see one in, of course, the Monitor Center. Yay. So Jones, in my opinion, is short shrifted for his role on March 9th, 1862, considering his ship, its weaknesses, and the Monitor having greater speed and flexibility. However, who won that battle? It would have been Jones, because Jones damaged the Monitor. So Catesby Roger Jones will be forevermore considered a hero of the Confederate Navy. Thank you all.